Hi, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and my experience working at San Diego Hospice. This will be narrated by myself, Peggy Reyman. I had a 43-year career as a registered nurse. I actually decided when I was 6 years old that I wanted to be a nurse. I realize now that that was a calling, but I certainly didn't realize it then. I started out working in the hospital in the intensive care and coronary care units. After that, I worked in an internal medicine cardiology office. Then I went into home health and finally hospice. I had never thought about working in hospice, but I had a nurse friend who just kept pushing me in that direction. I guess she saw something in me that made her think I would be a good hospice nurse. Looking back, I wish I had made that decision sooner because it was the most rewarding nursing I had ever done. I chose San Diego Hospice because I knew they were not only the biggest hospice in San Diego, but I had heard so much about how wonderful they were. I knew a couple of nurses who worked there, and I knew they were above average nurses. Even the grounds San Diego Hospice sat on was serenely beautiful with an amazing view. There were things they did all around the campus to make it extremely meaningful, not just beautiful. When I interviewed for the position, the hiring manager saw an, quote, open heart, unquote, in me. Obviously, that was something she looked for in the nurses she hired for her team. I came to learn that was something the majority of San Diego Hospice people had, and not just the clinicians, but everybody who worked there. It's hard to believe that a large organization could hire hundreds of people, all of whom were special people who all had one goal, whatever was best for the patients. I would not have put 4 of our family members in the hands of San Diego Hospice if I had not known wholeheartedly that they were a special group of people. The things I was told and heard repeatedly the whole time I was there were, you do the right thing for the patient. You do what's best for the patient. And if you're going to err, you err on the side of the patient. It wasn't just the doctors or managers who said this. It was something we all told each other, from the doctors to the aides and everybody in between. I became a mentor while I was there, and I repeated these things over and over to all the people that I mentored. I worked in both home hospice and in admissions while I was at San Diego Hospice. During the time I worked there, we continued to grow and became San Diego Hospice and the Institute for Palliative Medicine. We actually became the largest teaching hospice in the country, surpassing Sloan Kettering in New York. We had the only licensed hospice hospital in the state of California. Our fellowship program was open to doctors from around the country as well as international doctors. Our doctors also traveled to other countries to teach hospice and palliative care medicine. Their teaching, whether in San Diego or abroad, helped medical professionals learn and know that people did not have to suffer at the end of life. They didn't just teach, they showed how to relieve the suffering. The National Hospice and Palliative Care Association called San Diego Hospice, quote, the mothership of hospice and palliative medicine, unquote. I had the privilege of taking ride-alongs to patients' homes. The ride-alongs could be a medical student in their first week of school at University of California, San Diego, to a resident almost ready to graduate, or maybe even a doctor from another hospital who came to San Diego Hospice on sabbatical. We also took the fellows out on ride-alongs. The fellows could be from San Diego, another state, or another country. The feedback I got was always interesting, as they all had misconceptions about what hospice and a hospice patient should look like. It was far more complex than what they originally thought it would look like. One of the doctors who was sent from another hospital told me he could not imagine what more he could possibly learn about pain management when he first came to us, but was utterly amazed at how much he actually learned. They also focused on the patient as a whole, not just the physical. They were well aware of how the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual are all closely tied together and how one affects the other. This was something that I had been taught, but nowhere did I see clinicians focus on this as much as I did at San Diego Hospice and the Institute for Palliative Medicine. Nowhere did I see the amazing effects of what transformed in patients when the whole person was treated, like I did at San Diego Hospice. When an emotional or spiritual breakthrough was made, I could actually see the patient release and relax and become more comfortable and peaceful. As I said before, everyone worked for the good of the patient. We had a wonderful kitchen and kitchen staff. If a patient in the ICC, which was the Inpatient Care Center, wanted something to eat that we didn't have, someone would actually go out and get it for them, no matter what it was. We contracted with the best companies. The ambulance company we contracted with was always right there wherever we needed them. We never had to wait an unusually long time for them to get there. The durable medical equipment company always came through for us. There were a couple of times when management would contract with a different company, probably to save some money, but we quickly went back to our original companies because they always came through and provided the best care to our patients. The care to our patients was more important than saving some money. San Diego Hospice put out over $1 million worth of free care every single year. We would do whatever needed to be done for the patient, regardless of what the insurance would cover. We never turned a patient away for any reason, even if that meant meeting a homeless patient under a bridge in order to provide care, which we actually did. We treated the high-profile patients the same as we did the homeless. Something I heard other nurses say, as well as myself. At San Diego Hospice, I can be the nurse I went into nursing to be. And we were available 7/24/365. The staff at San Diego Hospice did some amazing things. There was a little girl in the ICC who had always wanted to ride a horse. So a horse was brought to the ICC, and she was lifted onto it and held there so she could ride a horse. A couple was married in the ICC. Another time, a patient wanted to make amends with family before he passed, but he did not know where they lived. One of our social workers worked really hard to locate them and was able to connect them to the patient over the phone before he passed. I had a patient with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, who could no longer speak, swallow, or move anything except her eyes. But she made it known that she wanted to take her final trip to Las Vegas. So we got in touch with the hospice there, arranged for them to take over her care while she was there, and made all the arrangements necessary for her to be able to make that trip with her daughter and a caregiver. There are just hundreds, maybe thousands of stories like these that took place at San Diego Hospice. I wish I knew or could remember more of them. The primary goal of the ICC was to relieve symptoms out of control. If the beds were all full, then we sent a team to the patient's home for as long as needed. We not only provided traditional medicine, but we also provided some non-traditional medicine, like aromatherapy, harp and music therapy, animal therapy. In fact, we had a famous dog named Baxter who gave so much love to our patients. When he was at the end of his life, he was taken around to patients in the ICC on a cart because he could no longer walk, but he was still able to give love and joy and got it returned to him. It was such an honor and privilege to have been able to work at such an extraordinary place as San Diego Hospice and to walk with patients and their families through the final stage of life. Sometimes we are the ones gifted with surprises from our patients or their families because of the things we learn as a result of caring for them. I remember trying to help a husband and wife come to a decision. One of the biggest fears a patient has at the end of life is being a burden to their family. The husband wanted his wife to put him in a skilled nursing facility so he wouldn't be a burden to her. It was just the two of them, so she wouldn't have any help. The wife had already planned out which room she would put her husband in at home, which would make it easier for her to care for him. The room was right off of the living room, so she could sleep on the couch and could hear him if he needed anything. She didn't want to put him in a facility and be separated from him part of the time. She wanted to be able to keep him home and give him all the loving care and attention he needed. This would become her final act of love for him. I couldn't make the decision for them, but I could try to help them understand each other's position. I remember another patient I actually had for around a year and a half. He had metastatic prostate cancer, meaning cancer that had spread to other parts of his body. When I made my initial visit to him, his pain was not well controlled at all. Because of what I had learned from our San Diego Hospice doctors, I was able to determine that part of his pain was nerve pain. I was able to call his primary doctor and got an order to add a medication for neuropathic pain to his current regime. That helped to reduce his pain level a lot and made him far more comfortable. He and his wife had been educators, and he had gotten into administration before he retired. They didn't know it, but they educated me during the time I had him as a patient. What I mean is, he had several complications during his course, and some were things I had not seen before. One of the first things that happened to him was, like so many patients, even though I had given him clear instructions not to walk without his walker because his cancer had spread to the bone, he resisted using the walker. So during an outing, while he was getting out of the car without his walker, he fell and fractured his hip. They called San Diego Hospice, and a nurse was sent out to where he was on the side of the road. Then, of course, an ambulance was called and he was sent to the hospital. After a brief stay in the hospital, he was sent back home. Then one morning, I get a call from his wife stating he couldn't move either of his legs. We sent him to the hospital for x-rays and discovered that his cancer had now spread to the spine, which was invading his spinal cord. He was able to get some palliative radiation, but unfortunately he was not able to walk after that. Due to his being bedbound, he developed what I originally thought was a bed sore. His skin was breaking down. It was treated accordingly, but it didn't get any better. I discovered it was actually a metastatic tumor, or a tumor that had spread and eroded through the skin. All throughout the time I had him as a patient, he needed frequent adjustment to his pain med regime as his pain continued to get worse. One of the times I called his primary doctor to get new orders, his doctor told me that when he referred the patient to us, he never expected him to last longer than 6 months. This is what often happens when hospice comes into the picture. Hospice gets the patient's symptoms under control, whatever they may be, and when the patient is comfortable, along with all the support they and their family get from the hospice team, the patient actually lives longer than expected. Then the last thing that happened with this patient is that, again, first thing one morning, I get a call from the patient's wife stating that he was in horrible abdominal pain and hadn't been able to have a bowel movement. I called the San Diego Hospice doctor on call and was able to get the patient into the ICC. As we thought, his cancer had now spread to the intestines. The San Diego Hospice ICC doctors got the patient pain-free, and he passed peacefully and comfortably within just a few days with his wife and daughter by his side. I got to tell you, I was nearly in tears more than once as I thought back on my experiences and the extraordinary experiences that happened at San Diego Hospice, and what a profound loss it is to the San Diego community. Thank you.